Alright guys, welcome back. In this video we're going to be looking at, again, imperfectly competitive markets, labor market now. And what we're seeing here, we're looking at the supply curve. And, well, it's not as easy as perfect competition. Don't worry, it's still not that bad though. Perfect competition in the labor market, we have a horizontal, the firm faces a horizontally sloping supply curve, which is equal to this up here, the MFCL, marginal factor cost of labor. Marginal factor cost of labor, again, just to review, is the additional cost imposed by employing one more unit of labor. The marginal factor, in this case labor, cost of labor. All right, so horizontal S equals MFCL for the perfect competitive firm. In imperfect competition, monopoly, monopolistic competition, and oligopoly, it does not work that way. We have an upward sloping supply curve, and then we have an MFCL that is not exactly the same as the supply curve. So why is this? The main reason is because the firms here are not price takers. That means that as they want to employ more units of labor, they have some market power. And in this case, it's not really market power for them, it's really the workers having the market power, because there are enough of them that as they employ more and more units of labor, go further to the right, they have to pay a higher wage because they are actually affected by the labor supply curve. I should say the market labor supply curve. So they face the upward sloping supply curve. So as they want to employ more units of labor, it's going to cost them higher and higher wages to get. They have to pay people in order to get those units of labor. So that's the upward sloping supply curve. It's the same reason that the labor supply curve is upward sloping that we've talked about in previous videos, right? But what about this marginal factor cost of labor? Why isn't it the same as the supply curve? And so what you have to think back to is anybody with a downward sloping demand curve, all right, which these three have when it comes to their products. Draw this down here, again, just for your reference. With that downward sloping demand curve, this is for product, by the way, so I'm going to write that there. Products, this is labor though, but the principle is the same. Again, I'm trying to prove to you that I'm not really teaching anything new, just slightly different context for it. When we have a downward sloping demand curve, and we go ahead and produce more of something, so we want to produce more output, so we see the quantity is going to increase, what we know has to happen is the price has to decrease. So, we have both a price effect and a quantity effect. The price effect is really the part that we're going to be concerned with here, because what's happening is the price effect says, well, we have to charge less for every unit, right? For every unit that we're selling. We don't get to charge the high price for this guy, so if this is point A, we're moving to point B, we don't get to charge the high price at point A anymore. We charge everybody the lower price at B, including for all the units that we could have sold at the higher price. So they end up with a marginal revenue curve, again, that is below the demand curve because they are subject to this price and quantity effect. So they don't add the full amount of that price, so their price is B, they only, in this case I have it where it's not adding anything in marginal revenue, but you get the idea that they don't necessarily increase their marginal revenue by the full amount. In fact, they don't. In this case, we're looking at how much it costs them. So the supply curve represents people selling their labor, but if they need to go further along this supply curve, so let me get it green so I don't mess up my markers too much. Let's say that they were operating at this point, we'll call that Q1. Don't drop this, you can just keep it as it was. And they need to employ more units of labor, so you need to go to Q2. So we have this upward sloping thing. We know that they're going to have to pay a higher wage, right? So wage 1, wage 2. So we can see that on here. However, do they only have to pay that higher wage to that last worker, to the additional workers? And the answer is no. All right, we're going to say that they are going to have to pay this higher wage. It's going to change their equilibrium wage. So again, the next video will bring it all home together. You have the demand curve on here and everything. But for now, the idea here is that when they move over here to Q2, they don't just pay that higher wage to this person, but this person keeps earning the lower wage. They have to give everybody the higher wage, which is going to mean that the cost of employing one more unit of labor, which is what MFCL means, marginal factor cost of labor, the cost of employing one additional unit of labor is going to be greater than the wage. So that would be one of the big takeaways, probably the big takeaway from this video, is that the MFCL is greater than the wage for imperfectly competitive firms, monopolists competition, and oligopolists. The marginal factor cost of labor is greater than the wage. For the perfectly competitive firm, it's the same thing. The wage is equal to their marginal factor cost of labor, not so for them. So you're going to see how that affects their market in the next video, so stay tuned. Till then, this has been a La Money production.